Let's fade the music and welcome everybody to Delaware Sports and My Sports Reports. I am Marshal Manlove coming to you from the home studio in Middletown, Delaware. This is an interview edition of our show, and already my video feed freezes on me. I got to figure out how to fix that, man. That is really annoying. All right. So there are a lot of voices around the state who cover local sports. All of their opinions are valuable and valid and very important for sure. That's what valuable means, of course. And we're going to welcome in Mr. Marty Sheehan from Delaware Sports Debate here in a moment. And hopefully when I press this button, he will appear. There he is. Marty, welcome to my show. Thanks for making time to come and talk with me.
Sure. Thanks for having me. I know you had John a few months ago, and took you and I a little while to catch up, but it should be fun.
Yeah. So first of all, let's talk about you a little bit and find out a little bit more about you. What's your background? How'd you get involved with Delaware Sports Debate?
Well, it's funny. For a long time, I was in banking, and then I moved to working for my brother's company. He has an excavation and concrete company. And then I got into following Fox Sports 1290, which I guess then was the Ticket. 1290 was the name of the program. But so I got interested in broadcasting. It was something I did in college at Shenandoah University. I got kind of interesting story. I was a pitcher on the team, and one day the color man for the local radio broadcast didn't show up. So the play-by-play guy came down and said, "Has anybody done this before?" So I, being a fool, I raised my hand and said, "Sure, I've done it before." I'd never done it before. And we had a blast. So it ended up whenever I wasn't pitching, I did the color commentary for the games,
cool.
which was awesome. So fast forward to about 2015, I saw that the NFHS network in Delaware, which a guy by the name of Jermaine McCove was running at the time, they were looking for color commentators. They were having a hard time finding some. So I agreed to do it. And just a cold game, he called me on a Saturday morning and said, "Hey, can you do the William Penn game at 1 o'clock this afternoon?" So I jumped on the internet, did as much research as I could do on William Penn and Newark, which was the game, and had a really good time doing that. And did it about, I guess, 5 or 6 more times. And then I became friendly with John Busby just through, we'd see each other in the booth passing by and talking. And he knew my brother from his son and my brother's son, my nephew, being the same age and playing the same sports on the same teams. So it turns out that John's partner at the time, who was the play-by-play guy, Matt Pensick, ended up getting a job with a TV station in Maryland. He's since skyrocketed through that now. He's doing really well. But anyway, they were looking for somebody. So I got an email out of the blue from Scott Klatskin, who is the voice of the Blue Hens. And at the time, and he may still be, running the sports department of Fox Sports 1290. And basically was just asking, "Hey, are you interested in doing play-by-play? Because we lost our guy." And I told him I'd never done play-by-play. So thanks, but no thanks. It's just not my thing. So he texted me or emailed me back. No, I didn't hear anything for about a week or so. And he emails me back and says, "John Busby says he'd rather do play-by-play. So would you be interested in doing color commentary?" So again, just out of the blue, I think it was a Tuesday or Wednesday when I got a call. We were doing a Friday night game in Glasgow. And John and I, just the chemistry was incredible from the start. He knew exactly when to set me up with what. I knew exactly when to jump in, exactly when to stay quiet. And Scott said, "Well, let's give it a try for the rest of the season." The first game was great. And we sort of never looked back. We did basketball. We did baseball. Here and then we'd each do different University of Delaware basketball games. And then the station decided that they didn't want to do live sports anymore, which seems to be kind of an epidemic in Delaware. I know WDEL really doesn't do much live sports anymore either. So we needed to find something else to do. And this was about 2020, I guess. And then all of a sudden the pandemic hit. So John and I are going stir crazy. There's no sports. We're trying to think of what to do. So when they announced, DIAA announced that they were going to restart the football season after they had said it would be canceled, John came up with the idea and said, "Hey, let's do a podcast. Let's talk about the issues surrounding the pandemic and getting back to sports." And it just became kind of a weekly thing, and we loved it. I mean, it's an opinion show. We have a lot of fun with it. It's not negative in any way. We don't, there's no attacking athletes or coaches or anything. Even though the opinions can be strong, it's never negatively done to where it would, impact someone. So it's been a blast, and we're going to continue doing it. We're kind of in a hiatus right now because John, if you ask John what his least favorite sport was, it would be baseball. Which is my favorite sport. So we're kind of taking a break there. His kid's doing all kinds of AAU stuff, and but we'll get back into it here at some point. But it's been an absolute blast, and we've gotten a great response from listeners. So it's just been a lot of fun.
So good job giving your background there, just like John. I just asked one question, and you guys take care of the rest. So your experience.
John and I can talk. Let me tell you that right now. I know your experience. I watched the show with John. Yeah, both of us can go on and on.
Hey man, makes my job easier over here, right? So let's defer to you and guest choice. What would you like to talk about?
I guess the first thing we'll talk about, because it's a big issue, and I know there'll be a meeting in a couple of weeks, but the Middletown issue with football. They were just sort of out of the blue a couple weeks ago. Someone noticed, a friend of mine actually, Phil Sagione on Twitter, pointed this out, and he said, "Hey, have you looked at Middletown's schedule?" So I did, and their first 6 games, the first 6 wins had all been changed to forfeit losses. So I thought that's strange. There was nothing from Middletown, no news from any of the media outlets. So I just kind of put it out on Twitter and say, does anybody know what this is about? And then it kind of blew up because you get, all these stories and everything. And then finally, we find out that they had an ineligible athlete for the first marking period of their season. And, if you go by the information that Middletown gives out, there's breadcrumbs to follow to figure out who this is. It's not really a big issue to find out who it is, but the issue became, how would it affect their championship? And there's been a lot of opinions going around, and this is not unprecedented, really. Well, the timing is, but in 2006, Glasgow High School went 7-3 and secured a spot in the state football tournament. Would have been their first berth since 1992. 3 days before the tournament started, through an anonymous tip, DIAA contacted Glasgow to let them know that there was a potential eligibility issue. Glasgow researched it, found out it was true, and reported it back to the DIAA, who then forced them to forfeit all 10 games, costing them their spot in the state tournament. So now this was a tournament you had to qualify for, and that's what we'll get into in a second. Fast forward to this year. This is found out in the spring after their championship season. It was found by a college eligibility coordinator who's recruiting this kid. So this person alerted Middletown and said, hey, we have some questions about his transcript because they would like to offer this kid a scholarship. So Middletown does some digging and finds out, in fact, the kid was not eligible to play in the first marking period, which covered the first 7 games of the season. So at that time, they're riding high. I believe their only loss was to St. Joe's, an out-of-town team that was in the top 25 nationally at the time. Mm-hmm. So where we are right now is there's a DIAA meeting on the 14th of April to talk about the situation. Now, it's interesting, again, it's unprecedented in the fact that it has never happened. Kevin Charles, who was the former DIAA director, has said he can't ever recall this happening after a season where a team had won a championship. So the issues are this. It would have every team in the 11-team 3A class made the playoffs. That was a decision, a bad one, because we had an 0-10 team, a 1-9 team, and a 2-8 team qualify for the playoffs, and the first round was absolute blowout city. But and they've since corrected that, by the way, to only 8 teams will make it next season. Mm-hmm. However, this would have dropped Middletown down from the top seed to the 10th seed, so they would not have had a first-round bye. Now, they would have cruised through their first-round game, and a lot of the people who are saying that nothing should be done or it's water under the bridge are saying, well, they were clearly the best team. That's debatable. They won the championship game by 6 points over Smyrna. But, here's some of the issues. First of all, the kid, who was apparently a very good player, got to play the entire season. Whereas if this was found when he transferred into the school, and he was an out-of-state transfer, which Middletown has admitted in the newspaper, which is pretty rare in Delaware for a public school. But they said that based on COVID and some other things that they miss this. So the kid plays the entire season. There's a lot of team chemistry that's formed there. There's a lot of reps that are in. If the kid plays a certain position, or depending upon what position it is, it could have a big impact on games. So, going back to the first round bye that they would not have had, now you're talking about Smyrna would have had 3 games, Middletown would have had 4. Who knows? Maybe Middletown gets knocked off because they play a different team in a different round. What if there's an injury? Braden Davis, their star quarterback, what if he gets hurt in that first round game? I just think there's a lot of questions there, and they would have been 1-7 entering the state tournament. They did have one game where they beat Hodgson at the season finale. This kid did not play, but he did play in the 3 championship games. And to me, there's a couple things. Number one, the kids already got their rings. Middletown already has their banner, and that's great. Personally, I think for the integrity of the sport, I think they have to vacate the title, DIAA. Now, I will preface it by saying this. I don't think they will do that. The newspaper was very clear that anything they decide to do, and Dr. Bradley Layfield, who's the chairman of the DIAA Board of Directors, said anything they want to impose penalty-wise would have to go through their lawyer. Anytime you hear that, you start thinking, well, they're probably not going to do too much. The kid is coming back next year, as far as I know. He was only a junior this season. So, I don't know. There's been a lot of opinions. The opinion I don't get is it's water under the bridge. It happened. Let's make sure it doesn't happen again. But to me, what you're saying at that point, and I go back to the Glasgow situation in 2006, we're either rewarding oversight or incompetence, or however you want to call it, in terms of them missing this issue. You would think an out-of-state transfer who's a superior athlete would get a closer look. You'd also think their parents probably would have a good feel for what their eligibility status was, especially since this is a college recruited athlete. But to ignore it doesn't make any sense. To me, you go back and you apply it as if you knew it when the season was happening and take it from there. Clearly, they would have had to forfeit those first 7 games. He would not have played. But then I just think there's way too many what ifs. And again, these kids know what they did. They won the state championship. They have those rings. They got the banner. Nothing could take that away. But I do think for DIA's official record, my opinion is they should vacate the title because there are just too many questions. There should not be a champion. I've heard people say, well, Smyrna should be awarded the title. You can't do that. They got beat twice by Middletown during the season. So, it's an interesting situation. Dr. Bradley Layfield, again, the chairman of the board of directors, said, we need to make sure this doesn't happen again, which is the same thing that was said back in 2006 when this happened. It's impossible. It's going to happen again. People are human. They're going to make mistakes. The question is, how do you fix it? And you don't want to punish kids, and nobody's going to take rings away. Nobody's going to take down a banner or anything like that. But it's going to be interesting to see what they decide. It could just be as simple as they give Middletown's administration penalties, or they put the football team on probation so that if there's another issue, more serious steps are taken. But it's just such an unprecedented situation because of the timing, because of how it was found out. Middletown has requested to speak at the DIAA meeting. I don't know as of this date if that's been granted yet. It is the first thing on the agenda, according to Dr. Layfield, on the 14th. So it'll be interesting to see. It's a myriad of mistakes and things, and what could have been, what ifs, but it's certainly something that we really haven't seen in Delaware before.
Well, these policies are in place, and they have been in place for so long to have everybody on the athlete qualify academically all year long.
Yep.
So somebody, in my opinion, I'm not accusing anybody, somebody had to know. The player certainly had to know. right?
That's my belief as well.
Those
The
teachers
the
had to
player
know.
and the parents had to
Had
have known.
Somebody had to know, and still allowed that to happen. But I think I'm with you there. You can't take those rings away. Well, they're not from DIAA anyway. They're
exactly. They're from the school.
They want to buy their own banner. That's fine. But
yep.
I believe that title needs to be stripped. And also, I believe you're right that it can't be awarded to Smyrna. It just erase the title vacated. You put it in there. You don't have to explain why. Everybody knows. And
exactly 30
years from now, everybody will try to figure out why. And like, okay, it's water under the bridge at that point. You know?
That's what John and I said. We said that 30 years from now, somebody's going to look up the playoffs once the playoff rolls around. They're going to say, "God, why was there a vacant title this year?" So, yeah, it's one of those things. It's more like a bookkeeping kind of thing. I think to keep their integrity, DIAA has to do something. And, one of the problems with DIAA, and I'm not going to go into this very long, and it's Donna Polk and her group, and there's only 3 of them. There's Donna Polk, I believe Stephanie Mark, and an administrative assistant. Mm-hmm. So people are always saying, well, why can't DIAA investigate these issues? I know Donna, based on how she talks in these board meetings, I think she'd love to. The problem is they don't have the staff to do it. They have no resources. At the last meeting, she all but begged for help in looking at some of these issues. There's been a lot of eligibility issues. There's been a lot of sportsmanship issues, which has gone through the roof in the past year, which is really concerning, especially abuse toward officials. Mm-hmm. But they just do not have the ability to track this. There were 2 issues. One was involving Middletown, one was involving Sally's. And again, this was in the public meeting, so I'm not speaking out of school here. And the answer was to send it back to the school to self-investigate. Now, I'm not real cynical, but when you tell the school, well, you investigate it, first of all, how hard are they going to investigate it? And second of all, what's the benefit of finding something wrong if you're the one who's in charge, especially when you know that no one else is looking at it? So that's what I'm afraid of here, that it's going to be more of a glossed over issue. And again, as soon as Dr. Layfield mentioned that a lawyer would have to approve any penalties, which, by the way, to me, it just seems ridiculous. We're not talking about a courtroom proceeding here. Nobody got hurt. Nobody had anything stolen. There was just it was an eligibility issue, and I'm not sure why, if DIA wanted to take a title away, how that would be handled legally. But I guess they have their rules and regulations, which, by the way, the rules and regulations for DIA, good luck to anyone who has those things memorized. It looks like it's about 1,000 pages long. So very curious.
Yeah, there is so much. You touched on something that I do kind of want to mention. It's about sportsmanship issues. I officiate volleyball, yep, and I officiated basketball for 5 years. And I will tell you what, volleyball's really not so bad. I think if you get yelled at in a volleyball match, you really messed up, right? I mean, it's kind of like that in softball, fast pitch softball. Like if a girl turns around, if you call a strike and they look at you funny, it's almost like a brawl has just happened on the field, right? The parents are the worst, really. But in basketball, the people talk to you in ways they would never, ever talk to you outside the gym, where they just called you like the nastiest, vilest thing. And I'm not taking this anymore, man, because I grew up a little differently. Okay, when I was younger and you talked to me like that, we were fighting. Okay, we were fighting, and now you just have to kind of bite your lip and have rabbit ears, was the quote that I heard. You just have to stand there and take it. I'll just quit.
Yeah, I've heard officials. I've heard some of the organizations say, well, they've got to keep their cool. Well, why? First of all, they're not being paid enough to keep their cool and take some of this abuse. But you're right. You hit on something that I've heard 1,000 times, and that is these people in the stands can be like rabid dogs in the way they talk to people. And then you go outside and they're friendly as can be. Mm-hmm. You think, my God, what happens in the course of this 1 hour sporting event? And yeah, basketball, I've watched games on TV. I've been to games, and the level of vitriol from the fans. And, my nephew is 14 and plays AAU basketball. And my goodness, that's just as bad. And, the officials there, they're getting paid like maybe $20 a game. And some of them are young guys. I mean, like 18, 19 years old. They're helping, pay through college or part-time job or whatever. And the abuse they take is just unreal. I always try to make a point after the games to go over and tell them good job. Even if they may not have had the greatest game in the world, these guys are putting their time out there. They're not getting famous from this. I always love when they say, oh, the referee wants to be the show. I don't know any referee that has ever wanted to be the show. I know they want to call it fairly. And, you'll have people say, well, this guy, every time he calls a game, he favors the Catholic schools or the public schools. And you're like, God, you're giving these people way too much credit. They don't think that way. They're coming out here and they do it because they love the sport. And they want to call a good game. No referee wants to have a bad game. Yeah. So it's just, I always say, well, if you're a referee, go up to a kid who's missed 5 free throws and be like, hey, kid, you know what? You suck. Because the kid's told you that 5 times during the game when you've called him for fouls or whatever. And I think I'm always amazed at the restraint of the officials. And they've done a really good job. And I know Donna pointed out some things. This year in football and basketball, there were parents following refs to their car. Mm-hmm. It has been really, really bad. And the thing that has increased the most is players during games mouthing off to referees. And I know, there was an incident in the state semifinals, the basketball game with Salesianum. And, referees at that point, it becomes really tough. You've been there. You don't want to throw a kid out of a game, but there has to be a line that can't be crossed. So I give a lot of credit to the officials, and I know the numbers have dwindled tremendously, and DIAA is begging for new officials. But in the same meeting, when you hear them doing that, and you hear them talking about how sportsmanship issues have gone up, 50%, what kid out there, what young guy out there is going to say, oh yeah, this sounds great. Right. Hey, for $50 a game, I can go out and get verbally abused for an hour and a half.
Right.
So
it starts at the pro level, though, and what people don't understand is that there's much, much more money involved. A bad call can cost somebody a championship and a chance to win a lot of money, earn a lot of money. We get all that, but they excuse the behavior too much to the point where everybody watches, parents will watch of athletes who are coming into their own and playing sports, and they say, well, they can do that at the pro level. Why not do it here? And also the part of the issue I found with basketball is the amount of leniency that the officials give to things like carrying and traveling and those two in particular. And when you start to call those violations at the amateur level, that's where a lot of this happens. On every contested shot, every layup where somebody's there defending, one of the teams is going to say, oh, that was a foul, that wasn't a foul. You get that, right? But it's actually all those other minor violations that begin to peck away at people's attitude as they're watching. And then when something happens, it explodes, right? But they get the idea that it's okay to do this from the professional ranks, and that's a great point. Addressed.
That's a great point, because one of the things I've heard from people watching the games is, the continuation rule in the NBA for the N1 situation. You get away with like 4 steps, and the foul happens, or the shot happens 2 seconds after the foul, but they still count it as continuation. And then you're exactly right. People think the same thing when they watch high school sports. They see a spin move where a kid takes 3 steps and is called for a travel, and they say, well, in the NBA, that's not called a travel. Well, those guys, again, it's a little different up there. And I think you do have to, as an official at the high school level, you do emphasize the fundamentals. You want to pick up those carrying calls, those traveling calls. They may not be called at the pro level, but again, I think at the high school level, you're still almost in a teaching and learning mode as far as the coaches, referees, and players, where you want to call those things. You don't want a kid going to college thinking you can get away with 3 steps. There was a kid, I remember when I was coaching a few years ago at Charter High School, a kid used to catch the ball and then take 2 steps before he would shoot. And, it was nobody corrected it when he was a JV player. Then he moves up to varsity. In the first game, he gets called for traveling 4 times because he's taking 2 steps when he catches the ball. And he can't figure out why, even though, the coaches, we've been telling him for 2 years. But it's one of those things. They see the NBA players, they see LeBron and these guys getting away with this stuff, and they think, oh, yeah, I can do this. And then all of a sudden the ref is the devil when he calls you on it. So, I give so much credit to the officials because you can see, even when a player would slam a ball after a basket, and you're thinking, my God, it doesn't get called because they're trying not to make a big deal out of it, but it perpetuates at that point too. They think, well, if I'm not going to get called for it, I guess there's nothing wrong with it. So, yeah, I'm all for the referees with the sportsmanship stuff, teeing up coaches, players. I just think they need to get a handle. And this is not the fault of the referees, as you know, of course. This has to be the parents and the coaches who are emphasizing this. But for the officials, go ahead and call it. I mean, you may get killed for it, but it's the right thing to do.
I remember my old family doctor was a basketball coach. He had 3 kids that played basketball. Nicest guy. But no one would sit near him in the stands, including his wife. Okay? He was so vicious to the officials that he would literally have a section of bleachers all to himself. It was a private school, which I'm not going to mention, of course. But it was funny to watch my doctor. I'm like, yeah, it's kind of scary. And
I know.
Uses tools on me. I'm not going to talk basketball with him.
That's what I was going to say.
Next time I go to see him. All right. So it changes. I just couldn't take that anymore. And I'm not really even a basketball fan, but I used to like reffing it for whatever reason. And I can't even stand to watch it on TV. I just really don't like it. But I like reffing it. But they sucked the joy right out of it. It was horrible. Like, who needs that for that amount of money, right?
I agree. I agree.
But
volleyball
school, and I'm one of the rules interpreters for volleyball, and I train new officials. And yes, if anybody's watching this, we are always looking for officials. So it's
That's
not as
great.
bad as basketball. Don't be scared off by what you just heard. Volleyball.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. All of a sudden, everybody's running for the hills. There is some good news, though. One of the things I wanted to talk about, too, was, you may have noticed this, too, because you guys cover this, is the offers that the Delaware kids are receiving in the last year or two. It just seems to be amazing to me. There are so many great athletes in the state right now. And because of social media, because of things like Huddle, where they can upload their highlights, I think we're seeing basically an unprecedented number of kids getting offers, and it is fantastic. I know your buddy lists offers from different states, and I always like to hear about that. But this year I'm just going through some of the ones that were recently. Markel Holman from Caesar Rodney just got an offer from Air Force. Ryan Adams from Salesianum just got accepted to Harvard, who had a 3% acceptance rate. That just blows my mind. Cam Edge, of course, the quarterback for Middletown or Smyrna this past year, reclassified, graduated, and is now going to back up Tagovailoa at Maryland. Luke Watson from St. Mark's already has 9 Division I offers. Noah Matthews from Woodbridge, Kentucky. Will Knight, who everyone will remember, led Smyrna to the state title a couple times a few years back, has kind of had a journey through colleges since then, but he's going to finish up his career at UConn with Jim Mara as the new head coach. Of course, Braden Davis, South Carolina. And that's just some of the big schools. And I know there's some people. I know Brian Johnson on Twitter. He's a Middletown assistant coach. He highlights a lot of these kids' offers. And whether it's, I think kids get hung up on the D1 thing, but whether it's D1, D2, D3, these kids are getting the work done. And it's not just, years and years ago in the 80s when I was a kid, you could get into these schools by being a terrible student and a great athlete. Those days are gone. There's too much oversight, and you look at the fact that Middletown was contacted by a college eligibility coordinator. I hadn't even heard of that 10 years ago. Right. So these kids are getting the work done on the field, but they're also getting it done in the classroom, and that is just I think that needs to be celebrated. I try to retweet or comment on as many as I can because it's great. And when there are issues going on in different sports and things like that, to see these kids getting a chance to, even if they don't play, even to participate at the next level, to get a college education, it's phenomenal. I love seeing it.
Well, one of the sports where we're actually a hotbed for D1 athletes is field hockey. I'm not sure if you're aware of that or not. It's not
Now, see, I'm not a field hockey guy, so no, that's great. I did not know that.
Yeah, we have a couple kids from Del Mar, 3 kids from Del Mar made the national team, the 18 and under and the 16 and under. Of course, they haven't been beaten since 2016.
That's true. Yeah.
Cape Henlopen, same thing, but this state has put a lot of field hockey players in D1 programs.
I got to ask you
to southeastern Pennsylvania.
I got to ask you about the field hockey, and you just said they hadn't lost a game since like 2016. What is it about that? Because I wonder that every year when I see them winning. Is it the feeder programs down there? Is it the programs for the younger kids?
Yeah, there is definitely the feeder programs, and I'm not really sure. So I had been away from this for about 10 years or so and got back in just this past October. Mm-hmm. And when I had been covering this more heavily, the power of in field hockey was up here in the north. It was Tower Hill, perennial champions, and then Cape Henlopen started to make a couple finals, won a championship, won a bunch, and then Del Mar. I know a lot of those kids play together, and it's the same thing with lacrosse. I remember, they put sticks in these kids' hands at very early ages. And I remember vividly being down at Cape Henlopen to watch some game somewhere of some sort. And I'm on top of a stand, I'm videotaping something, and I look down, there's this little parade of lacrosse players, they're probably like 6 or 7 years old, right? Marching in a line with their sticks. And I thought to myself, that's what you have to do. You have to get those sticks in their hands. And I'm sure the same thing happened with field hockey and all too. There's a couple programs down there. The Cape, the name of the Shore Field Hockey program was a big one. Probably most of those kids all came from, and they're just unbeatable down there. That Del Mar Wildcat team, and they only graduate like one senior. They're going to be whooping up on everybody again this coming year.
And just fundamentally, I've watched some college field hockey games, and of course I watch anything that's in the Olympics. Mm-hmm. But at the level of play, when you look at Del Mar and then compare it to some of these upper levels, you're like, my God, there's not any difference. These kids are as fundamentally sound. They never make mistakes. They don't beat themselves. And, at this level, you look at, I'm a lacrosse guy. I love to watch lacrosse. And you'll see the top teams like Sally's and Tower Hill and programs like that, Cesar Rodney. The kids are just whipping the ball around the perimeter, just like you see Johns Hopkins on TV. And they're playing some of these lesser teams in Delaware. And I know Sally's plays a national schedule to some degree, but, who are still having catch and throw issues. It's just amazing to me that some programs are able to, Sally's is different because they can attract kids from anywhere. There's no requirement that they have to be anywhere near Delaware. But that's why I always am amazed by Smyrna is just the level of consistency and the kids who are coming there. I mean, they're coming up through the Smyrna school system. And by the time they get there, it's incredible what they've been able to accomplish. And the coaching staff, I mean, they've got to be incredible because, again, I remember coaching basketball, and it's like some of the kids who come in need to have so much work on the fundamentals. And it just looks like that the coaches at different levels downstate now are really, really preparing these kids to be star players when they get to the high school level. It's been really fun to watch.
Yeah, it's good to see that power swing down there. And lacrosse is getting much more popular around here. I'm surprised it isn't as popular at the pro level nationally. It's got everything that you'd think Americans like, right? It's like high scoring, it's fast,
it's physical.
It really does have everything. And I'm not sure why it hasn't caught on like a couple of the other sports.
I agree. And to your, you were the volleyball referee, I'm sure, and you may have seen recently that DIAA is inching closer to making that a state championship sport. It's nice to see a lot of schools now, kind of the way it was for lacrosse 10, 15 years ago, school's now adding the boys volleyball teams. And of course, the girls volleyball is phenomenal. If anybody's been to the Final Four at the Bob, the level of competition is insane. But it's great to see another sport kind of making its way up to the mainstream as well.
Yeah, so we just talked to David Lee, the head volleyball coach for the boys and girls at Dickinson the other day, and he's been a great advocate for boys volleyball. And it's really a couple other guys too, Jeff Grickle, Brian Fraticelli from Sally's and Charter, respectively, who are great advocates for the sport. And there needed to be 16 teams. And we had it there, but of course the virus kind of killed it off a little bit. There was 18 this year, some middle school programs, and it looks like perhaps next year this could be a DIAA sanctioned sport, which will free up some funds for them. And Mr. Lee's vision there will have come true, and a lot of other guys' visions too. But I just mentioned him because I talked to him the other day.
And to your point about how much fun lacrosse is to watch, anybody, if you haven't watched a volleyball match, they can be incredibly exciting. I'm always amazed at the kids with the diving and the digs, and it's just, again, if you haven't been to the Bob for a Final Four of the volleyball weekend, I know Mike Lang of 302 Sports is the biggest praise singer of this, and it is an event. It is fun to watch. It is competed at a very high level, and it's going to be really cool to see the boys play at that level too once this gets implemented.
So one of the more exciting state championship tournament events in the state is actually the semifinal round of the volleyball state tournament. Generally held at St. Mark's. The thing with the Bob is that the volume can kind of get lost from the crowd, and the first game's a consolation game. But I
forgot about that. The infamous third place game, yes.
Yeah, so it's a best of 3 instead of a best of 5. Both teams had just lost the semifinal round, but in that semifinal round, the energy in there is fantastic. It's one of the best events to go to on an evening. And the other one I like is the Dual Meet State Wrestling Championships. So where you have, it might have been a little different this year, but it used to be 4 mats going on at the same time where you have the semifinals. Then they remove the Division I, Division II semifinal rounds, and then they remove 2 mats and do the Division I and Division II Dual Meet State Championships at the same time. Fantastic. Those are 2 great events to watch.
I watched it for the first time this year on the NFHS network, and I agree. There's so much going on at one time. And a couple times, they zoom the camera back and show you all the stuff going on at the same time on these mats. The crowds are, again, incredible at these events. And Benny Mitchell, who works for 302 Sports, is in my mind, the most knowledgeable guy about Delaware wrestling in the state. And he gets so excited, and he loves calling the matches. And, just a real quick shout out to his son, Trey, who was named the head coach at Caesar Rodney. Right. Which is kind of cool. He's been an assistant there for a while, but a good wrestling family. But it was a lot of fun to watch. It was definitely something I wouldn't mind checking out in person.
Yeah, just for casual fans or fans of sports in general looking for stuff to do, those are a couple of great events. And one of the things I like to do on this show is bring people in and talk to the kids and some of the coaches so that people have an idea of the personalities behind the names that they read in the box scores and all, and then hopefully people go out and root for them at some point. Maybe go watch something, support them. It's still a very small state, right?
Yeah.
And this state fits 30 times into New Jersey probably, so everybody gets to know each other after a while. So these kids want to have people out there. It's a good couple of hours out on an evening or an afternoon or something like that. And it's when the championship stuff comes around, it's fantastic. The emotion is raw. It's exciting. I initially got into this 27, 28 years ago when I started doing a local television show, and I did it for other reasons, but I got caught up into the whole scene, the excitement, the emotion, especially with girls' sports, because it's genuine. The emotion that you see at a girls' high school event, the excitement, it's genuine, it's endearing, and it's just a whole lot of fun. So it is addictive.
And I love when you have the teams on, because and to your point, to see the personalities of the kids behind the stats and the box score. And there's always, some of the kids, it amazes me how well spoken some of these kids are. And you always get the shy kids and things like that, and that's expected. But some of these kids, you could tell, man, there's the future leaders of America. Some of these kids who are so well spoken. And I agree. I had texted you before about the Plymouth White Marsh. My cousin Dan Daugherty, who's the head coach there. Watching that entire tournament, to your point about the emotion with girls, is incredible. It was so much fun to watch their journey, and that was a big part of it for me. Was they just wear their emotions on their sleeve more than the boys do, and I love the word you used, endearing. Because you feel a connection to these athletes. You can almost viscerally feel the disappointment or the excitement. The elation and the sort of like Jim McKay, the agony of defeat and the thrill of victory. It's really fun to watch, and I've seen that with the volleyball tournament as well with the girls. So that's a great point. I love that word endearing, because I do think you can sort of develop a connection by watching these kids and generally sort of taking that emotion in that they're expressing out there.
Speaking of Dan Daugherty, maybe you could reach out to him. I've tried to reach them, and I can't get any response.
I will indeed.
The other event I like to watch is the cross-country state championships, and also the Newcastle County championships for cross-country. That is a cool event to watch as everybody starts the race, and to be at the finish line where everybody's coming along. It's a great day out if it's nice. Now, I tried to go to the state championships this past year, and a cold front blew in, and I don't even know how they competed in that particular champion. It was horrible. And
I remember reading about that.
Oh, it was awful.
Do they hold it at White Clay Creek State Park? Is that where they? Okay.
Is it White Clay? No, it's Brandywine Creek State Park.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, it was awful. Absolutely awful. But so here's the thing about cross country, where I was doing my television show. I'm standing at the finish line. It's like 1997, 1998 or something like that. And that's how I got hooked on cross country. So a kid from Archmere wins the Division II state championship. And this is at White Clay Creek. And he's ahead, I don't know, a minute, 2 minutes or something like that. We're waiting for anybody else to show up. And around the final corner, heading down to the home stretch, are two runners. And the kid in third place is from St. Andrews. His name is Morgan Scoville. I'll forget this because it made an impact on me. And he puts on a kick that eventually lands him in second place. He passes the kid, whoever that was, who's in second. He's in third. And as he crosses the finish line, he throws up all over himself. I'm like, what are you? And I thought to myself, so I'm in my early 30s at the time, and I was like a athlete wannabe, okay, and I wasn't exposed to the type of motivating leaders that, and I wasn't good enough, so that's really part of it. But so I was trying to figure out why somebody would run themselves sick just to get into second place, which sometimes people are goofing around and say, well, that's the first loser, right? Well, it turns out he was the state champion the next 2 years, right? So he was a sophomore when this happened, went through that physical agony, drove himself to limits that nobody could really understand, and me particularly as I was watching it. And then to see it pay off the next 2 years had an impact on me. Right, and like I wanted to run after that to see if I could push myself, and I couldn't because I was 250 pounds, right, and just any step was painful, but therefore I guess I did run myself into pain. But it made me watch these sports and follow some of these kids and the coaches much more closely, and to whatever extent kind of helped me out in my life too. But I've taken note of those who are good at pulling out the most out of their athletes, and then watching some of these athletes who actually have that experience go on and experience and do big, great things with their lives. And you can tell why, because they're willing to push themselves to extremes that most people don't. And then some of those people who don't wonder, well, like, oh, you know, some of those people are the ones who then whine about people who are successful, and they don't really understand what goes into that success. So that is the kind of thing about sports that I've taken out of covering it for, you know, almost 30 years or so, that mental aspect of it, and how these sports and these competitions that these people participate in help them in their lives.
I agree. Yeah, there's kids, and John and I saw this when we were calling basketball and football games in high school, and sometimes, you know, those kids are not necessarily the star players. They may not be the leading scorers. So I remember there was a game we did at Caravel, and they had a kid, Brandon Sempachan, and he was a 6-foot kid. He could score, but this kid had a motor for the entirety of the game, defensively, offensively. I mean, if this kid was on you on defense, you were ready to kill somebody by the end of the night, because this kid was just all over you. And I remember thinking, you know, there's nobody gets prizes for defense. You know, that's always one of those things. I always prided myself on defense when I was playing basketball way back when. But I love to see the kids that go that extra mile. And you're right, they're the kids that are going to be, most likely, they're going to be successful because they've seen what happens when you outwork people. They get that feeling through sports, and I think that's an amazing part of sports. I know people say, "Oh, it's only a game." It is. The final score, it doesn't really matter, you know, at the end of the day. But the effort you put in, the coaching you get, the feedback you get from coaches, and you know, I always hear people say, "Well, I wish he was more of a yeller," or, you know, "I wish this guy wouldn't yell so much." And it's, you know, the best coaches are the ones who are tailoring their message, and they're reaching every kid and hopefully getting each and every kid to their potential. And then from there, it's the kid, you know, to your point with that kid, the Scoville kid, where, you know, you just can't teach that. I mean, a kid's got an internal feeling, internal desire that drives him to the breaking point and beyond. I think that is a great aspect of sports that does translate to real life.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Well, we're getting a little long here, Marty, because I know what happens. You know, by this time, the only people that are watching this are those who love us the most, and you know, and
I know the feeling,
and good friends and all that kind of stuff. So we should probably think about wrapping it up there. But anything that you want to conclude with, talk about?
No, I just want to say, a shout out to your show, and I know you have a bunch of different platforms. I usually watch on My Sports Reports on YouTube. You do a lot of good things. You have the teams on there, the coaches. I love the NL or the National Letter of Intent stuff that you do with your buddy on there, who's got just an amazing radio voice. I can listen to that all day.
It's fantastic.
Just incredible. But, you know, a shout out to people like you and the others who are highlighting high school sports when really a lot of the coverage isn't there like it used to be. You know, I was pulling up copy of the News Journal for some research I was doing going back into the 90s, and the game stories for each game and stuff. And I know cutbacks have had a huge impact on that, but I think shows like yours and 302 Sports and the stuff we're doing and social media are getting the message out there about kids, and I just think that's phenomenal.
Ironically, though, so I'm still, this is going to go on another minute or two here. So
it's
ironically,
okay.
Though, like when I started doing this, so I did my television show. There was another group. They're called Youth in Sports. They would bring in kids,
I remember that with Dr. Axe, I think, or
yeah, he bought his way into that show, which is fine. You know, I was doing like a sports center type thing for high school sports for quite some time. You know, started the website, and back in the mid '90s, was kind of blazing a trail at the time. So one of the reasons that like my website and all at the time, which is DelawareSports.com, had a lot of traffic was because there wasn't a lot of coverage. Everyone was complaining about coverage, right? So now you go out there, you start giving some coverage, and for a while, and it was very successful until the economy tanked in 2007, 2008, and that's why I got out of it. I had to get out of it for a while. But when I came back, now there's so much, right? There's so much. Everybody has, every team, every not every player, every team, every school, they have Twitter pages, Facebook pages. There's podcasts, there's other publications, other websites covering sports. Now there's so much that it seems like stuff gets lost in the shuffle. Now we went to this other extreme where so if somebody is following, they want more coverage of Conrad Sports. So they do a good job. Somebody does a great job on their social media site there, right? So, but there's so much stuff that it gets lost in everything else. So I think everybody starts to filter their way into the only place that they're really interested in, and then end up missing a lot of the other interesting stuff that happens and gets talked about along the way. So
I never thought about that, but you're right. I mean, if you're interested in Conrad lacrosse or Conrad baseball, you follow their YouTube feed, their Twitter feed, and you're right. You may be missing bigger pictures of stuff by focusing just laser like on that specific sport or that specific school. I never thought about that before.
Yeah, I kind of find that a little interesting. And there used to be a time when I'd try to interview as many people as possible, right? Anybody who wanted to talk to me. Now, I'm having a hard time getting people to write me back. It's just so strange. It's, I was out for 10 years. I do other things. This is a hobby now. But that 10 years, there's a lot of changes happening in those 10 years. Let's put it that way. But, I'm just kind of here to have fun. I know you're there to have fun. You guys are doing a great job. It's, it was good talking to John. I think it was good that we talked to you guys separately. Otherwise,
I agree. Yeah.
Otherwise, I just should have, I just turned my picture off here and just let you guys do your own do your regular show.
You're probably right. Yeah. Once we get going, man, it's.
Right. Well, look, you guys are welcome here anytime. Anytime you want to talk and collaborate, I'll collaborate with anybody. I'm not here to compete with anybody. I never was, and if you want to get together, do something here, there, anything like that, just reach out. And
sounds good. I appreciate you having me. Thanks again, man. I know this was a while getting together, but this was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. All
right. Well, hang out there, okay? I'm going to close this show, and then I'll come back and just talk to you off air.
You got it.
So let me see, figure out how to do this the right way here. So there we go. All right. So that's Marty Sheehan. Marty, is it Sheehan or Sheehan?
It's Sheehan.
Sheehan, okay. Yep. Obviously, you're still there, by the way. Your microphone is still live. So so don't curse on me there.
You got it.
Okay. All right. So if anybody is still watching at this point, this show is brought to you by me, Marshal Manlove, stage hypnotist. And where is that there? Let's see. Up there's Marty again.
Can't get rid of me.
If you would like an interesting, funny, memorable occasion, visit marshalmanlove.com and you will see highlights and everything you want to know about my comedy hypnosis show. There, it's marshalmanlove.com. And if you are in the market to buy or sell a home in Delaware, Maryland, or Pennsylvania, I help you out there too. I have 4 jobs. And it's Berkshire Hathaway Fox and Roach is my affiliated company. My website there is marshalmanlove.foxroach.com. And probably the only one who has seen this is my good friend Joe. And maybe Tommy K and my wife at this point. These are the only people who are probably watching this at this point. All right, where am I now? All right, let's go. I really need a producer, man. That's what I really need. It's just tough to do all by myself sometimes. There we go. There's Marty again.
I'm still here.
Marty is still there. That's all right. You're a good guy. It's good. It doesn't matter. All right. So here we go. Now you're gone, but your voice is definitely going to still be there. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I am Marshal Manlove. Marty Sheehan's behind the scenes there. Saying goodbye.
Have a great sports day, everyone.
We'll see you when we see you.